My name is Laura Ramirez, 29 years old. The quiet hum of conversations mixed with the clink of crystal and the soft strains of piano drifted through Maison, the kind of French restaurant where every laugh sounded rehearsed and every smile hid a price tag. My father's 60th birthday dinner should have been a celebration, but celebration felt too generous a word for the ice-cold atmosphere blanketing our table. I sat between my sister Claire and my brother Jason, both draped in designer perfection. Claire's diamond earrings sparkled brighter than her warmth. Jason's cufflinks bore our family initials, a symbol he never let anyone forget. Across from me, my parents Richard and Margaret Ramirez held court like royalty, surveying a subject they couldn't quite recognize as their own. "Water," my mother asked, feigning surprise. "Laura, it's a special occasion. You should at least have some wine." Her tone carried that gentle scolding. Only mothers of my upbringing could perfect a mixture of care and condemnation. "I'm working later," I replied, reaching for my glass. Jason chuckled, his voice slicing through the air. "Still waitressing, huh? At that little diner. What's it called?" "The Bluebird." "The Bluebird Cafe," I corrected quietly. "And yes, 4 years now." Claire sighed dramatically, adjusting her Cartier bracelet. "You turned down Goldman Sachs for that. You could have been a VP by now. Imagine what Dad must feel." Dad barely looked up from his phone. Let's not rehash old disappointments. It's my birthday, not Laura's career intervention. Laughter rippled weakly around the table, except from me. I stirred my water slowly, the ice clinking like a countdown clock. If they only knew. Claire leaned forward, her tone bright and poisonous. "Jason just closed another major acquisition. Tell her Jay." Jason straightened his tie, pleased. "Ramirez Investments just acquired Peterson Tech." The CEO had no clue what he was sitting on, got it for a steal. The corner of my mouth twitched. Peterson Tech. I knew that name well. I'd spent months orchestrating that deal from the other side. I took a slow sip of water and glanced at my watch. 47 minutes. "Still working late shifts?" Dad asked suddenly. "You live in that tiny apartment drive, that old car, never travel. It's time you started thinking seriously about your future, Laura." "I am," I said quietly. "Very seriously." Mom reached across the table and patted my hand, soft manicured, condescending. "We're just worried about you, dear. You have so much potential and it's going to waste." Potential. Their favorite word for failure. I smiled faintly. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. My phone buzzed under the table, a discreet vibration against my thigh. I glanced down a message from Marcus, my CFO. "Stock transfer complete. Press release in 30. You ready?" My pulse quickened. I typed one word, ready. Jason's laughter dragged me back. "At least she's not asking for money. Remember when she wanted us to invest in that silly tech idea of hers? What was it called?" "Winter," something Claire said dismissively. "Ramirez Lane Solutions." I corrected the name, feeling electric on my tongue, the company I'd buried years ago, under a different identity. Jason snorted. "Right. Good thing we didn't throw money at that." Mom sipped her wine, smirking. "You have to admit, Laura, you're not exactly a business person." 32 minutes. I forced a polite smile. "You're right, Mom. I just serve people." They didn't notice the double meaning. They never did. Jason was talking about his new mansion now, private tennis court wine cellar, infinity pool. His voice blurred into the restaurant's hum. The waiter refilled my glass, and I caught my reflection in the rippling water calm on the surface, but deep beneath something was about to break loose. 10 minutes. "Are you even listening?" Mom snapped, her voice cutting through my thoughts. I looked up slowly. "Oh, I'm listening." 5 minutes. Claire was describing the custom chandelier for Jason's house. Dad was pretending to listen. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus press release in 1. Then a hush. The background piano faded out. The restaurant's big screen flickered on, replacing muted sports highlights with the breaking news banner. "Ladies and gentlemen," the anchor announced in a stunning revelation tonight, "the tech world is shaken by a billion-dollar acquisition spree by a mysterious company known as Phoenix Digital." Jason froze mid-bite. The anchor continued. "Among the firms acquired Peterson Tech, the total value now exceeds $4 billion. And in a shocking twist, the CEO behind Phoenix Digital has just been revealed." The screen changed and there it was. My headshot, my name. Laura Ramirez, 29-year-old founder and CEO of Phoenix Digital. The table fell silent. Mom's wine glass hovered midair. Dad's phone slipped from his hand. Jason's fork clattered against his plate. Claire blinked as if trying to wake from a dream. I placed my napkin gently on the table. Well, I said softly, I should get going. My shift starts soon. Jason sputtered. Your shift? Of course, I said, rising. At the cafe. I own it too, along with this restaurant. And I paused, savoring the disbelief thick in the air the building we're sitting in. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came. It's amazing, I added, reaching for my coat, what a waitress can build while people are too busy underestimating her. As I walked toward the exit, whispers rippled through the restaurant like a spark through dry leaves. People were recognizing me, the waitress billionaire, flashing across every phone screen. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. My driver opened the car door, sleek black. Definitely not my old Honda. I glanced back once through the glass wall. My family sat frozen still, trying to comprehend that their shame had become their spectacle. My phone buzzed again. Marcus stock's up 30% already. Ready for tomorrow's board meeting. I smiled. Ready. And Marcus, I added, texting back, make sure the boardroom has a clear view of my brother's office. I want him to see what real power looks like. Because sometimes revenge doesn't roar. Sometimes it smiles. Morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, my real office at Phoenix Digital headquarters. The city stretched out beneath me like a conquered battlefield, every tower and billboard reflecting pieces of the empire I'd quietly built while everyone thought I was wiping tables for tips. On my desk sat a single object out of place among the sleek monitors and investor reports, a chipped Bluebird Cafe mug. My one relic from the years no one believed in me. I lifted it slowly, inhaling the familiar aroma of diner coffee, burnt bitter and grounding. My phone buzzed endlessly beside the cup. 47 missed calls from Jason, 32 from Claire, 65 from Dad, 51 from Mom, and hundreds of messages, some demanding answers, others begging for meetings. I scrolled through them one by one. Mom. Laura, please call us. We need to talk. Jason. What the hell is this? Are you insane? Dad, emergency family meeting. 9:00 a.m. Sharp at the firm. I checked the time. 8:57. Right on schedule. Instead of driving across town to their gleaming office, I opened my laptop and sent a single message to the family group chat. Laura, if you want to talk, join the video call I just sent. It'll be more efficient. Within seconds, my screen filled with familiar faces, pale, drawn, and furious. Dad sat at the head of the Ramirez Investments conference table, his posture rigid. Mom beside him, eyes red-rimmed but calculating. Jason paced behind them, barely keeping still. Claire perched tensely at the edge, her nails drumming against the mahogany. Why aren't you here in person, Dad demanded. I leaned back in my chair, letting the skyline behind me fill the frame. Because I have 3 other meetings today, and none of them involve explaining myself to people who already decided what I was worth years ago. Jason's voice came sharp and loud. You've been lying to us for years, playing waitress while secretly building a billion-dollar empire. What kind of sick game is that? I didn't flinch. I never lied. You just never asked. Laura. Mom said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and wounded pride. We just don't understand. Why didn't you tell us what you were doing? Why let us think you were struggling? I paused, letting the silence drag. Because struggling made you comfortable. It reminded you that you were superior. You didn't want the truth, you wanted proof you were right about me. Dad exhaled through his nose, a restrained attempt at authority. This attitude won't get you far. Business requires humility, and humility, I cut in voice, calm but sharp. You mean obedience. Their faces flickered the truth, landing harder than I expected. I clicked a file open on my screen and shared it to the call, an old audio recording. Do you remember this? I asked softly. Static, then voices. Dad. Thank God Jason took over. Laura just doesn't have what it takes to lead anything real. Mom. She's emotional. She doesn't understand business. Claire. She's happy serving coffee. Let her. The playback ended. The silence afterward was deafening. That was 3 years ago, I said. The same night I registered Phoenix Digital under an alias. While you laughed about my apron, I was acquiring the patents that now power half your investment portfolio. Jason's jaw tightened. You manipulated Peterson Tech. That's unethical. No, I corrected, leaning forward. That's strategy. The kind you'd understand if you'd ever looked past your own ego long enough to see who really runs your world. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dad's voice returned, smoother, now calculated. Clearly we've underestimated you, he said carefully, but we're still family. We can combine our strengths, merge. Phoenix Digital with Ramirez Investments. A unified force. No. The word hung in the air like a slap. Dad blinked. Excuse me. I said no. You don't get to benefit from what you mocked. You don't get to hold the reins of something you didn't believe in. Laura Mom pleaded, we're trying to make peace. Peace. I almost laughed. Yesterday, I was your embarrassment. Today, I'm your opportunity. I built something without your approval, and that terrifies you. Jason slammed a hand on the table. You can't just cut us out that building. I interrupted. Your building's lease expires in 60 days. I won't be renewing it. Claire's head jerked up. You own our headquarters? I smiled faintly. Bought it 2 months ago. You didn't notice, that's the problem. You never notice anyone beneath you until they're standing above. Jason's face flushed crimson. You can't do this to your own family. Oh, I can, I said evenly. And I am. Consider it a long overdue lesson in paying attention. Dad tried one last time, his voice low, persuasive. Laura, be reasonable. We can help you grow Phoenix Digital beyond what I asked. Beyond the woman you thought would never amount to anything. I stood letting the camera catch the skyline behind me again, the city they once claimed to own. I have a meeting with the governor in 20 minutes, I said. A real one. You'll have to excuse me. Laura, wait, Claire started, but I was already closing the window. The screen went black. For a long time, I sat in silence, the hum of the city seeping through the glass. Then I reached for my Bluebird mug, took a slow sip, and smiled. The waitress they'd dismissed was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the table they used to sit at and the roof above their heads. By the third day, the headlines had shifted from disbelief to obsession. The waitress who outsmarted Wall Street, Phoenix Digital, the secret empire, the Ramirez family fallout, betrayal or brilliance. My assistant Sarah entered my office with her usual calm efficiency, though I caught the flicker of amusement in her eyes. You've made quite a few enemies this week, Ms. Ramirez, but also a lot of admirers. I smiled, signing off an acquisition document. The two often arrived together. Just then her phone buzzed. She frowned. Your sister's here. No appointment. I leaned back in my chair. Of course she is. Send her in. Moments later, Claire Ramirez walked into my office, wrapped in a beige cashmere coat, clutching her Hermes bag like armor. Her eyes darted around the space, taking in the glass walls, minimalist design, and panoramic view of the skyline she once mocked me for chasing. Well, she said finally, her tone brittle. I have to admit it's impressive. I expected something smaller. Minimalism helps me think, I replied, gesturing toward the seat opposite me. Sit. Let's skip the compliments. You didn't come here to admire the view. She sat down slowly, crossing her legs with a studied elegance. I've been going through some old family documents. Did you know that technically, as the eldest, I could have a claim to any business using the Ramirez name? I arched an eyebrow. Phoenix Digital doesn't use our family name. That's why I chose it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You've been ruthless, Laura. You blindsided your own family. Jason's been a wreck. Dad barely sleeps. Mom's probably drafting statements to save face, I cut in. Don't insult both of us by pretending this is about emotional damage. She flinched slightly but recovered quickly. They sent me to talk to you. Of course they did. I leaned forward. Let me guess. They'll stop spreading rumors about my company if I lease them back their old headquarters. Claire hesitated. Silence was answer enough. I studied her for a moment, the way her fingers tightened around her designer bag, the faint tremor in her jaw. Do you even hear yourself, Claire? You all mocked me for years. Now you're negotiating rent. Her composure cracked for just a second. You've made your point, Laura. But this public humiliation, is it really necessary? I stood moving toward the floor-to-ceiling window. Necessary, no. Poetic, absolutely. Just as I turned back, Sarah burst in, slightly breathless. Ms. Ramirez, security alert. Someone tried to access the main server room using a stolen badge. I didn't need to ask who. Who's in the building, Sarah? She hesitated. Your brother. Claire's face drained of color. Jason. Of course, I murmured. He always was the blunt instrument of the family. I straightened my blazer and nodded toward the door. Come on, Claire. You might as well see how your brother defines damage control. We took the private elevator down to the sub-level server room. The corridor was sleek metallic and humming with quiet electricity. When the doors opened, we found Jason Ramirez restrained by 2 security guards, both former cafe employees I'd promoted years ago. Let me go, Jason snarled. I know she's hiding something. No one builds this kind of empire from a diner paycheck. I stepped forward calmly, heels clicking on the polished floor. You're right, Jason. No one builds it from a diner. I built it because of one. He twisted toward me, eyes burning. You think you're better than us now? No, I said softly. I just stopped pretending you were better than me. Claire whispered. Jason, what were you thinking? She's lying to everyone. There's no way she did this legally, he snapped. I gestured toward the guards. These men, Tom and Eric, used to mop floors at the Bluebird Cafe. They now run my corporate security division. I didn't look down on them. I listened. I saw their potential. That's the difference between us. Jason's face darkened. You've lost it. You're power drunk. Maybe I said, stepping closer. Or maybe this is just the first time in your life you've met a woman who doesn't need your permission to succeed. He lunged, but the guards held him firm. Claire's eyes widened, horrified. Jason, stop, she pleaded. You're only making it worse. I sighed. Escort Mr. Ramirez out, and make sure his access is permanently revoked. As they dragged him toward the elevator, he shouted, You'll regret this. Laura family always wins. The doors closed with a metallic ding. The silence left behind felt oddly peaceful. Claire turned to me, shaken. You didn't have to humiliate him like that. Didn't I said quietly. He broke into my building, tried to steal from me, and called it family loyalty. You all taught him that entitlement. Claire swallowed hard. So what happens now? I met her gaze steadily. Now you tell Dad and Mom that their empire is crumbling because they built it on pride, not people. And you, Claire, you decide which side of history you want to stand on. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression torn between anger and dawning understanding. They'll never forgive you for this, she whispered. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I replied. I'm asking for memory. As she left, the hum of the servers filled the air like the sound of distant applause. I looked around the room, the wires, the blinking lights, the quiet power that pulsed in the walls, and smiled. This was my family now, the network I'd built, the people I'd trusted, the empire born from silence and steel. And unlike them, this family ran on loyalty, earned not inherited. The email came just after midnight. From Richard Ramirez, subject dinner. Laura, your mother and I have been reflecting. Perhaps we were wrong. The firm is struggling. I'd like to understand what you've built. No business talk, no negotiations, just a father and daughter dinner and honesty. Please say yes. I stared at the message for a long time. My father. The man who once told me I'd never survive outside his shadow, now asking for my time as though I was the one granting mercy. I typed slowly, deliberately. To Richard Ramirez, dinner is fine, but not at Maison. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe, 7 p.m. Come alone. By the next evening, the cafe buzzed with its usual gentle rhythm. Espresso machines, hissing laughter, bubbling from the kitchen, the soft clatter of mugs and plates. I'd chosen my usual corner booth, the same one where I used to count tips and dream of something more. When the door chimed, every instinct told me he'd come, but seeing my father actually step inside the humble diner still sent a jolt through me. He looked completely out of place in his tailored navy suit and polished shoes. His eyes scanned the room, uncomfortable, uncertain, before landing on me. Laura, he greeted, his voice softer than I remembered. You look, well, different from the waitress you used to lecture, I asked, sliding a menu across the table. Sit down, Dad. He hesitated, then did. The vinyl seat creaked beneath him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us held years of unspoken words, accusations, disappointments, things neither of us dared admit. My waitress, came over. The usual, Laura. Please, I said with a smile. And a black coffee for him. Dad glanced at the laminated menu as if reading it required courage. I don't remember the last time I ate at a place without reservations. That's the problem, I said quietly. He looked up sharply. Laura, I didn't come here to fight. Neither did I said. But I'm not interested in pretending this is a family reunion. He exhaled, leaning back. You really think I never cared, that I didn't want you to succeed? You wanted me to succeed your way, I replied. When I chose mine, you saw it as rebellion, not ambition. The waitress returned with 2 steaming mugs. The rich smell of coffee drifted between us. Dad watched her walk away, then said softly, She called you by your first name, with respect. They all do, I said, because I earned it, not demanded it. He stared at me, something flickering in his eyes. Maybe pride, maybe regret. You built something remarkable, Laura. But why the secrecy? Why let us believe you'd failed? I traced my finger along the rim of my cup. Because failure was the only thing that made you comfortable. It made me small enough for you to love without feeling threatened. His shoulders sagged. For once, the great Richard Ramirez looked like just a man trying to understand a daughter he'd misjudged. I was hard on you, he admitted. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. No, I said. You were protecting yourself from being wrong. He didn't argue. The silence stretched until Betty, the cafe owner, and my old mentor approached the table. "Evening, Laura," she said warmly. "This your father?" I smiled. "Yes. Dad, this is Betty." She gave me my first real chance when nobody else would. Betty nodded, extending a hand. "Pleasure, Mr. Ramirez. You raised a brilliant woman." He took her hand, surprised. "Thank you. I suppose I just didn't realize it soon enough." When she walked away, Dad's gaze lingered on the staff, the laughter, the ease, the small acts of teamwork unfolding all around him. "You know their names," he said quietly. "You know their stories." "I know everyone's story here," I said. "That's why this business works. I built Phoenix Digital the same way, not from power, but from connection." He looked at me for a long moment. Maybe that's what I never understood. Maybe I said it's what you never valued. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening just slightly. "Then teach me. Not business, I know business. Teach me what you know. How to see what you see." The words hung between us, raw and unexpected. I studied him carefully. The man who once belittled every dream that didn't look like his. For the first time, I saw something real in his face, humility. "All right," I said. "But we start from the ground up, tomorrow morning. 5 a.m. Meet me here. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty." He frowned. "Dirty, what are we doing at 5 a.m.? I smiled faintly. "Making coffee. Serving people." "You wanted to understand me, Dad." "Then start where I started." He shook his head, but there was the faintest spark of curiosity in his eyes. 5 a.m. then. When he reached for the bill, Betty appeared again, already holding the receipt. "It's on the house," she said with a wink. "Laura's been paying it forward for years." Dad froze, staring at her, then at me. "You've been—" "Every time I came here," I said softly, "for every person who reminded me where I began." He said nothing for a while, just nodded quietly, absorbing it. As he stood to leave, the door chimed again, and a cold breeze swept in. He turned back the weight of years in his expression. "You know," he said, voice low, "I spent half my life looking down from skyscrapers. I never realized how much you can miss when you forget to look up from the ground." I smiled. "Then tomorrow you'll finally see it for yourself." He hesitated, then gave a small, genuine nod. 5 a.m. As the door closed behind him, I sat back in the booth, the warm hum of the cafe wrapping around me. For the first time in years, the bitterness in my chest loosened. Maybe revenge wasn't about breaking someone down. Maybe it was about showing them what they never saw until they couldn't look away. The dawn light spilled faintly through the cafe windows, soft gold, brushing the worn tile floors. The world outside was still half asleep, the streets quiet except for the distant hum of delivery trucks and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Inside the Bluebird Cafe, the air smelled of roasted beans, warm bread, and something more invisible, the quiet pride of early work. I stood behind the counter, apron tied neatly around my waist, helping Betty restock the pastry case. My hands moved automatically, years of muscle memory, though I hadn't needed to do this in a long time. At exactly 5:02 a.m., the door chimed. My father entered wearing jeans and an old gray sweatshirt. He looked unsure out of uniform for the first time in decades. His posture, always commanding in boardrooms, seemed smaller under the glow of fluorescent lights. "Morning," I greeted. "You're late." He glanced at his watch, confused. "By 2 minutes." "Then you're late," I said, simply handing him an apron. He hesitated before tying it around his waist. "Haven't worn one of these since college." Then it's about time you remembered what honest work feels like. Betty walked by, balancing a tray of muffins. "Good morning, Mr. Ramirez. Welcome to the trenches." He offered a polite nod, visibly out of his element. "Where should I start?" I pointed to the sink. "Dishes first, then coffee. After that, we'll talk about customers." His eyebrows rose. "You're serious." "Dead serious." He stared at the sink for a long moment, then sighed and rolled up his sleeves. The first splash of hot water hit the porcelain, and his expression shifted irritation. Discomfort, then something more difficult to read. While he worked, I poured the first batch of coffee, the grinder roaring to life. The sound filled the cafe like thunder. He jumped slightly. "Welcome to my old alarm clock," I said with a smile. He shot me a look, half exasperation, half amusement. "How did you do this for years?" "One shift at a time," I replied, "and with people who cared enough to keep showing up." He said nothing, but I saw the faint softening in his eyes when Betty teased him for stacking dishes wrong, or when our youngest employee, Maya, corrected his clumsy attempts at the register. Every small humiliation stripped away a little of the armor he'd built over a lifetime of being in control. Around 600 a.m., the first customers trickled in: construction workers, nurses, students with sleepy eyes and heavy backpacks. I watched as Dad awkwardly took an order from a woman in scrubs fumbling with the cup sizes. Large caramel latte, he repeated, holding up a medium cup. Other one, I called out gently. That's the small. He blinked at the label. This is the small. Welcome to the modern economy, I said dryly. The woman chuckled kindly. You're doing great, sweetheart, she told him and moved on. Something flickered in his face, humility, maybe gratitude. After an hour, his hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion. You do this every day, he asked. 4 years, I said, refilling sugar jars. Sometimes double shifts. He leaned against the counter, breathing heavily. I think I owe a lot of waitresses an apology. Start here, I said. Wipe the tables. He gave a small laugh, a real one this time, and obeyed. By the time the morning rush ended, the sun had climbed high enough to pour warmth through the windows. The cafe was alive with chatter, the kind that comes from shared exhaustion and purpose. I poured him a fresh cup of coffee and nodded toward a booth. Sit. You've earned a break. He sank into the seat, wiping his brow. I think I just worked harder in 2 hours than I have in 20 years. Then you finally understand why I built this place the way I did, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. He sipped the coffee, grimacing slightly. It's bitter. I smiled. So was I. That earned a quiet chuckle. For a moment we sat in companionable silence, watching Betty laugh with Maya near the counter. She looks proud of you, he said softly. She should be. She taught me everything. He nodded slowly. I used to think leadership was about power. Now I see it's about trust. You didn't build an empire out of rebellion, Laura. You built it out of people. I leaned back, arms crossed. You finally see it then. He looked around again at the walls, the workers, the regulars, who greeted me like family. His expression was something I hadn't seen in him for years, awe. I never knew success could look like this, he murmured. That's because you only measured it in numbers, I said gently. But real success, you feel it. It's in how people look at you when you give them a chance. He set his cup down, eyes glistening faintly. I think I understand now why you didn't tell us. We would have ruined this. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I needed to build something you couldn't touch, just so you'd finally see me clearly. The door chimed again, and a young man walked in, one of my scholarship students from Phoenix Digital's mentorship program. He waved, grinning. Morning, Ms. Ramirez got the internship letter. I smiled. Congratulations, Leo. You earned it. My father watched as the boy thanked me and hurried out again, his face soft with wonder. You're changing lives, he said, and all I ever did was chase deals. Then stop chasing, I said quietly. Start building. He looked down at his hands, still damp from washing dishes, a smear of coffee on his cuff. Then he nodded. Teach me. I reached for my apron and handed it to him. Lesson 1, never forget where you started. Lesson 2, never think you're too important to start again. As he took it, the morning light broke fully across the cafe. For the first time, I saw my father not as a critic or an adversary, but as a man finally humbled by what he'd never understood. Sometimes revenge doesn't destroy, sometimes it rebuilds. A month later, the skyline looked different. Maybe it was just the light, or maybe I'd finally learned how to see it. From the top floor of Phoenix Digital headquarters, the city stretched endlessly, cranes swinging glass towers, gleaming morning haze rising like a promise. My father now worked just 5 blocks away, but not in any boardroom. I'd placed him as a consultant in one of our new mentorship centers, the ones built to teach young entrepreneurs about sustainable business ethics and leadership. Every week, he arrived early, coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up. Betty sent me photos, sometimes him laughing with interns fixing a jammed printer, staying late to clean up. If someone had told me 6 months ago that Richard Ramirez would be wiping down a whiteboard instead of dictating from a corner office, I would have laughed. But here we were. The man who once believed success lived in skyscrapers had found meaning at ground level. As for Claire, she'd left the firm too. The day after Jason's meltdown, she came to me again, this time not with demands, but with quiet determination. I want out, she'd said simply. I can't live under Dad's version of success anymore. I offered her a partnership in a smaller initiative, Ramirez Line Foundation, a program aimed at funding women-led startups. She accepted. Jason, however, hadn't spoken to either of us since. The last thing I heard, he was trying to start a rival investment group, but his arrogance made it crumble faster than it formed. Sometimes I wondered if he'd ever understand. But not everyone needs to be part of the ending. Some stories just fade. The intercom clicked. Ms. Ramirez, Sarah's voice said gently, Your father's here. I smiled. Send him in. A moment later, he walked in no suit this time, just khakis, a pressed shirt, and a notebook under his arm. He looked lighter, freer. I brought something, he said, placing the notebook on my desk. It's a lesson plan for the new mentorship program. Thought you might want to look it over. I flipped it open. The first page was titled, Building from the Bottom, Understanding the View from the Ground. I looked up at him. You've been writing this yourself. He shrugged, a little shy. Betty said I should. Said it might help others not make the same mistakes I did. I smiled, genuinely moved. She's right. He hesitated. I also wanted to thank you for letting me in. I don't deserve it, but thank you. I stood and rounded the desk. For a moment, we just stood there, father and daughter. The space between us finally cleared of pride. You don't have to deserve forgiveness, I said quietly. You just have to show up for it. He smiled. Then I'll keep showing up. Before he left, he glanced at the wall behind me where my old Bluebird Cafe apron hung framed in glass. Still keeping that old thing up, huh? Always, I said. It reminds me who I am. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, he said, looking out the window, I used to think the best view was from the top of a skyscraper. But I was wrong. I tilted my head. What's the best view then? He smiled. It's the one where you can still see the ground. After he left, I stood alone in my office for a long time, watching the city breathe. Down below, the cafe was still there, the morning crowd spilling out the door. Betty waved up from the sidewalk. She always seemed to know when I was looking. I pressed my palm against the glass, the skyline reflected around me. My empire, my story. People often think revenge is about proving someone wrong. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quieter. It's the grace to grow so far beyond their imagination that their old judgment simply can't reach you anymore. I'd gone from waitress to CEO, from being invisible to being the headline. But what mattered most wasn't the billions or the buildings, it was that I'd built something no one could take away respect. As the sun climbed higher, the light hit the framed apron glinting off the glass like a medal. That old piece of fabric wasn't a reminder of where I came from. It was proof of what I'd become, someone who could serve and still stand tall. I took one last look at the skyline and whispered more to myself than anyone else. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so right they can't look away.